Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation. My name is Jason James and I'm just sort of doing the introductions and things at the moment. Today Sumi Kanazawa is opening her exhibition downstairs, and if you haven't seen it yet, I'm sure you will after you've heard her discussion. And she'll be in conversation with Jonathan Watkins. And I'm just very briefly going to introduce the two of them before I let them get started. So Sumi comes from Japan. Obviously, she comes from Hyogo Prefecture, Kobe City, and studied in Kyoto, and has done a number of major exhibitions in Japan, some of which are a little similar to the one downstairs and some of which are not. But she's had solo exhibitions in places such as Yokobo Art Space, which is an art space we've had a number of dealings with. And she has also had a show at Mori Art Museum. Well, she's going to talk about her work in detail, so I'll just leave it at that for now. And then Jonathan Watkins has been a regular help to us here at the Daiwa Foundation, so thank you always, Jonathan. Until last year, Jonathan was the director of Icon Gallery, the leading contemporary art gallery in Birmingham. And in that role, he has promoted a number of Japanese artists in the UK. And I always think of him really as the go-to, well, along with Lena, of course, the go-to person if you want to know about Japanese art in this country. Certainly some of the artists that he's championed, I think, have some overlap in style with Sumi's work. So he seemed like the right person to be holding this conversation with her. And that is all I'm going to say about the two of them. So I think Sumi is going to talk about her work for about 10 minutes before she then has a conversation with Jonathan, and then we'll open it up to questions from the floor.
So thank you for coming to see my exhibition today. So I was surprised that so many people have come. So thank you very much. So I'm happy. Before I start to explain about my works, let me introduce myself briefly. So I'm Japanese Korean artist, and I was born in Japan, but my nationality is Korean. So, I and my family have lived in Japan as immigrants for nearly 100 years since my grandmother's generation. So, I have 3 family names. For example, about Kim. Kim is a Korean name, and this name represents my nationality and ethnicity. So, next to Abe. Abe is my Japanese name, but my husband's family name, because in Japan, 95% Japanese women take their husband's family name after marriage. And in Japan, a marriage couple are still not allowed to have separate family names. So, from this name, so I can read about social position of Japanese women and the patriarchal custom of Japanese society. And lastly, it's about Kanazawa. Kanazawa is previous my Japanese name. So, I use as artist name. I lost by marriage. So, I can also say Kanazawa is Japanese Korean name because inside Kanazawa is a hidden Chinese character Kim of Korean name. So, I can read Japanese Korean history in this. So, why have Japanese Korean in lived in hidden in Japanese society, or did they have to do so? So until now, just by explaining about family names, so we can see about social programs such as nation, ethnicities, gender, minority, and the immigrants. So, but on the other hand, how about is Sumi first name? Sumi is only name I gave. My father gave me, and Sumi is common name in Japan and Korea. So maybe my father wanted me to be loved by many people in both countries, maybe Japan and Korea. So, and it's only his love for just one person in there. So the reason why I told you about my family name, my name story, because this story represents a concept of my artworks. So people live with two sides, as an individual and part of a society. I have been thinking about the eternal contradiction of human conditions through my work. So, I would like to explain three main artworks briefly. First of all, it's about number series. This work uses actually alien registration number, and this work is based on my experience when I first saw my number. So this mechanical and emotionless number seem to represent my ethnic identities as third-generation Koreans. But on the other hand, these long numbers seem to indicate very many someone else's existence and a long time history. So this work have developed in changing home and content. So, and this piece is first piece of number series. So I made this work when I graduated to my university in Kyoto. Yeah. So, and next about borderline series. So I have made some works about border, and for me, border is the word in between, because I was inspired by the view of the between North and South Korea. I saw inside the borders landscape, so through telescope. So, and there was vast field of grass and deep forest. So, and the border is political symbols between nations, for example, North and South Korea. But on the other hand, any thin line on a map existed in reality as a space, and it happened in various phenomena, and the stories are born in there. So I would try to recreate world in between, like a landscape I saw at the time. So, and about road line project, yes. This project is called Road Line Project. This work, I used 100-meter barbed wire fence of a Korean military base, and I stayed in a small island for 6 months, and that island is called Penyon Island. So Penyon Island is closest to North Korea. And lastly, it's about the drawing on newspaper. This work started in 2016. The reason is that I had a baby in 2015. So anyway, I had to do change the way of my art practice. So, and I thought artwork I could do at home. So, and every night I start this work after I put my son to bed. And usually from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. I love the quiet time for me. And I draw as if erasing the article from newspaper, and I draw to shine more light on the images and the words I'm interested in. So, and these works express about discrepancy between individual sense of time and the society with linear timeline. And yes, and this is installation I exhibited in the Mori Art Museum, maybe 2022. So, and this time I exhibited one different drawings newly derived from drawing newspaper. Title is number 0608 2023. Yes. I do this drawing just twice a year. So August 6 and August 9, the days when atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And yes, I was drawing. I'm drawing a just sky over article about atomic bombs. Yeah, so I would like to more inspiration and the concept of artwork when I talk about drawing on newspaper. So from now, I would like to talk with Jonathan my artworks I introduced so far.
I mean, it's such an achievement to be speaking, giving a talk in English. I mean, congratulations, it was wonderful. I think to talk about the work maybe a little bit in the order in which you showed it, Sumi. I don't think many people understand what everyday life is like for people with a Korean identity in Japan, and I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that. We saw the work with the alien registration number, for example, which I think is I think it's your number.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you say how it is, what is it like being Korean? I mean you're Korean, but you weren't born in Korea, and your parents weren't born in Korea. It's an identity that you inherit from your grandparents, I think.
大丈夫ですか？わかりました。
訳してください。
はい、じゃあその日本滞在の韓国人としての日常生活についてもう少し詳しく聞きたいですね。
それはmy grandmother generation and my father's generation and me is all different. So because 日本語でいいですか？
日本語で、はい。
例えばおばあさんは最州とチェジュアイランドっていうところから来て、 で外国人として日本で暮らしてたんですけど、その当時は日本国籍植民地下だったので日本人として暮らしてた時期もある。
Okay, so Sumi's grandmother came over from a Korean island whose name I can't possibly pronounce. What is the island?
Jeju Island.
Jeju Island. And at that time, Korea was a Japanese colony anyway, so she was able to get Japanese citizenship through that route.
そうチェジュアイランドは韓国と日本のちょうど間にあるんです。
So that the island, Jeju Island, is exactly between Japan and Korea.
So, and 彼女その後の外国人に戻ってくださいって言われるんですね。日本が戦争に負けるから。
So she was told she had to return to being a foreigner after Japan lost the war.
でその戦後5年後に朝鮮戦争が起こって彼女は見たことのない2つの国の国籍を選ばなきゃいけなくなっちゃう。
So then 5 years later there was the Korean War and Korea itself was divided into two and she was forced to make a choice as to which nationality she would take of the two Korean options.
彼女のアイデンティティとしてはその島の人としてのアイデンティティが一番強いですね。
And in terms of her own identity, her strongest identity is as somebody from that island, from Jeju Island.
それは歴史的な背景があってすごく有名な4.3事件っていう事件があってその韓国とノースコリアとサウスコリアの、お互いに国を作ることに反対したムーブメントっていうかそれが最終島で起こるんですね。独立国家を作ることに反対する。
その2つが
韓国と北でに独立国家を韓国を作ることに反対する動きが出るんです、最終島で。それはビッグ大きい事件なんですけど。
So there's a historical incident which she called the 4-3. So it was like the 3rd of April or incident in Korea, in which some people, Korean people, were opposing the creation of these separate states.
それはそれ朝鮮戦争前なんですけど。
So this is before the Korean War.
その時に最終島の島の人がいっぱいジェノサイドされるんです韓国軍から。
So then the Korean army basically committed genocide on the people of this island.
そのコミュニズムみたいな普通のその人なんですけど、まるでその共産主義の人のような扱いを受けて一方的に殺されるっていう事件があった。
So in this incident they were treated as communists and therefore presumably undesirable, and a lot of them were killed.
だからその南にも北にも複雑な感情を持っている。沖縄の人に近いかもしれない。
This is your grandmother. So yeah, so her grandmother has quite complicated feelings about both North and South Korea, and may actually feel closer to Okinawa, which of course is part of Japan.
で、私の父の世代になると、彼らはもう日本で生まれてるんだけど、両親は韓国から来た人たちで、よく例えで言うんですけど、生みの親は韓国、育ての親は日本。だけど両方の親から愛されたいけど愛されない。言えます？
Hang on a minute. 海の親？
生みの親、産んだ親。
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So her father was born in Japan, but to Korean parents, and therefore had Korean nationality. And so he said that his birth parents were Korean, but he was living in Japan.
Yes.
So he feels he has two, Korean and Japanese parents, but is loved by neither of them.
わかります。その例えです。例えで。For example, その産んでくれた親を韓国で育ててくれた国は母親は日本。
Okay, so no, sorry, it's not. So it's the country, Korea, that gave birth to him that doesn't love him, and he was brought up in Japan, which doesn't love him either.
But the parents loved him.
I'm sure his real parents love him. Yeah, loved him. Yeah.
だけど私の世代はもはやそれもない。すごく客観的に国とは何なのか、民族とは何なのかを 見てる第三の視点の世代だと思います。
Yeah, so Sumi herself is third generation, so the story is in a way simpler, but she has to decide whether her identity is her ethnic identity of being Korean or her, the fact that she's lived in Japan for her whole life and therefore Japanese.
The fact that we saw the identification number on the, well, we see it here, it's very clear, but here it's fading away. Is there a significance to this juxtaposition of the two images?
この2つを隣にしている意義について、ここでは消えていってるんですね。
これは本当は7枚あるんです。7枚、one week の7枚の写真が本当はこの間にあるんです。
Yeah, so she actually took 7 photographs, one each day for a week.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's gradually fading away.
その間お風呂にも入らないで日常生活を送って、この文字が自然に消える状態を1枚ずつ毎日撮ってた。
So she didn't actually have a bath in that week. She just continued her normal daily life and took photographs of it every day, gradually fading away.
背中に書いたの自分で書けないから。
Yeah. And she couldn't write it herself on her own back.
常に誰かが書くものっていう。
Yeah, so somebody else has to write it.
Yes, yes.
で、私が死ぬように、私が変わっておばあさんになって最後死ぬように、私のバックグラウンドにあるそういうネーションとかそういうものも変わって、形も変わって、イデオロギーも変わって、ひょっとしたらなくなるかもしれない。永遠的ではない。
So she's saying that just as she herself will eventually become an old woman and die, all of these things gradually fade away, countries and ideologies, in the same way as these numbers do.
Okay, so it's more of an existentialist statement rather than, I mean, of course, it's intensely political, and I wondered if it was an idea that, almost an optimistic idea, that your alien identity dissolves, but it sounds like that's not the case.
外国人としてのアイデンティティが消えていくっていうよりは、もっと実存主義みたいな、全部が消えていくっていう考え方なんですね。
そうですね。もっと。
Yeah, so
yes.
I mean, basically she says yes. Yeah, this idea that everything.
Well, when you die, you ultimately. But I mean, I think your Korean identity and your identity, as signified by this alien registration number, informs a lot of your thinking and a lot of your artistic practice.
その韓国人としてのアイデンティティ、そしてこの番号が象徴する外国人としてのアイデンティティはかなり自分のその実践に強い影響を与えているように考えますね。
すごくインパクトがあった私の中でこの番号っていうのはすごくミニマルでとてもその感情のない番号。
Yeah, so she certainly received a great impact when she became aware of this number, which is a very emotionless thing.
Yes, and this is something I was going to mention as an interesting comparison with another Japanese artist, Tadasu Takamine. Takamine Tadasu, whose work was shown at the Mori Museum and relates to his experience as Japanese but married to a Korean woman. And in his case, it's actually quite an extensive sequence of photographs about their relationship, how he relates to her family, images, and quite a lot of almost diaristic text. It's interesting that you have an opposite tendency. His background is theatrical, but you have a tendency towards a kind of minimalist abstraction, and we see it in a lot of your work, and we see it a lot in the work which is downstairs.
わかりました。その高峰忠の彼は韓国人の奥さんがいて、かなりなんか複雑な写真がいっぱいあるその関係についての作品があるんですけれども、そして日記みたいなその原稿もついていて、彼はちょうど逆の傾向というか、スミさんのが非常にミニマリストの考え方ですね。それに比べると。
And is it because it's almost too much? I mean, your family history, what you describe, it's not just you know, your grandfather did this, your grandmother did this, and they've got a kind of soap operatic story. I mean, it's so bound up with geopolitics, you know, the horrific end of the Second World War and the consequences that that had for these populations, but your family in particular. And I wonder if, in the same way that Onkawara's response to Hiroshima and Nagasaki was to almost distill it down to emotionless numbers, you feel it's almost too much to deal with, so this is the only kind of response you can make.
こういう感情のない数字を使うのは、なんかあんまりにもなんかたくさんなんか出来事がいろいろあったせいなのか、例えばその第二次世界大戦が終わった、爆弾とか、そのご家族に対する影響とか、そういうのが大変なので、オンカワラみたいに感情のない数字に、簡単にするという考え方ですか？
でもそのある一方ですごくその時間の量とか人間の存在を感じた、まるでその大事な暗号を解くキーのようにも見えたんですよ、この番号が。
So she felt that these numbers actually represent long lengths of time and individual people's lives. So they're representative of a lot of things.
この次にあった作品が私の番号から父親の番号が出てくるまでひたすら書き続けるんです。これは私の番号で、その後父親が出てくるまで、写経のような。
So in this next work, she actually wrote out all the numbers, starting with her own number, writing them out in order until she got to her father's number.
So because
so this is like copying out a sutra,
Yes.
which Japanese people do as a religious practice.
父親は私にとって唯一無二の存在で、私が偶然書いた番号全部もひょっとしたら誰かにとって唯一の存在を表しているかもしれない。
So, of course, Sumi's father for her is an incredibly important individual, and she thought that all these other numbers in between presumably represent people who are very, very important to somebody.
想像したら楽しかった。
So she enjoyed imagining that with all of these numbers.
これの最後に最初の番号がもしあったら、それはどんな番号で誰が持ってたんだろうっていうフィクションのストーリーを考えるんです。
So then she came to think finally, well, presumably there was a first number. So she sort of invented a story about the person who had the first number.
この番号は外国人登録法っていう法律が昭和22年、戦後2年後にできるんですね。
So these numbers were introduced through the foreigner registration law, which was passed in Japan just 2 years after the war in 1947.
もちろんフィクションなんでそんな人はいないんですけど、だけどその歴史を見ると多分私のおじいさんの世代の人たちを表現してるなと思った。
So of course this is just fiction. It's something she made up, but and probably such a person doesn't exist. But whoever had the first number in 1947 would be the same generation as her grandfather.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
私はそのストーリーを考えたんです。
So she made up a story about this person.
でそのストーリーの中に登場するおじいさんが一人暮らししてる部屋をインスタレーションで作った。
So she made an installation in which this man, as an old man, is living by himself.
で3つの部屋があって、これが彼の故郷の最終島のみかん畑を表しているベッドルーム。
Right. So there are 3 rooms in the installation, and this is him growing like tangerines.
これが彼が座っているキッチンで、私が手紙を書いてるんです。私が B176404261 から11のあなたへっていう手紙形式でストーリーを書いてるんです。
So this is this fictional person's kitchen, and Sumi was writing him a letter in the kitchen from her own number, which I can't remember, but which we saw before on her back, to this person who she's given the number 1111 to.
決して届かない手紙なんだけど、
So obviously this letter will never be delivered to him.
その手紙を読めばこの話が全て歴史がわかる。この番号の秘密で。
But if you read that letter, you would understand the whole history of these
これゲストが
numbers.
読めるようになってる、彼のようにまるで。
Yeah, so this is so that the people visiting the exhibition could read.
本当はちょっと見えないんだけど、この襖の奥が私が最終棟から手紙を書いてるホテルの部屋があるんです。この奥、この襖の向こう側。
Okay, so the other side of that screen is the hotel
チェジュホテル。
where
チェジュ島、最終島に彼の故郷を訪ねていて、そこのホテルで彼に向けて手紙を書いてるその映像が。
Oh, I see. It's a video of the hotel in Jeju where she started writing this letter to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, every number represents a human life, and it's a number that signifies alienation and dislocation. But you resort to a practice which is almost like a kind of meditation. You know that it becomes almost a sort of aspiration to a kind of stillness. I think in your response to and an emotionless conclusion to sort of countless stories which are intensely emotional.
じゃあ各その番号はその裏に人間がいるわけで、でいろんな大変なストーリーがあるけれども、スミさんのこういう作品ではそれを瞑想みたいになんか静かにしてただ一つの数字にすると、そういう考え方でいいんですか？
その私のたった一つの番号からその多くの個人の存在をまず2番目で表して、最後は歴史っていう一人、この一つの番号からどれぐらい私のイマジネーションを広げれるか、それがやってて楽しかった。
So part of what she was trying to do was to see just how broadly she could imagine based on this simple number representing somebody's life, and through doing that she would be able to imagine the flow of history.
Yes. And this is so interesting in relation to the work that's on exhibition here, and this sort of conflation of your individual identity and yet this much bigger picture. I mean, the images that you'll see are almost cosmic in their configurations, based on current affairs, in a very complicated world right now. I wanted, though, with this idea of balance or sort of weirdness, is the DMZ, the demilitarized zone in Korea, the 38th parallel, which we saw the images of the roses with the thorns on the barbed wire, which is a very sort of nice correspondence. But you made the observation as well that border, it's not a line, it's I think a 3 or 4 kilometer stripe through the landscape, is one of the most peaceful places you can experience. Could you say more about that? Because I've been there, and it is so odd, but from your point of view, probably even odder.
全部通訳するべきかわからないんだけれども、とにかくこの国境の部分ですね、彼も行ったことがあって、非常に変なところだと感じたんですけれども、もちろんただの線ではなくて、なんか幅が3キロ、3、4キロぐらいあるんですよね。でその中は意外と静かなところで、でスミさんには彼よりも変に思ったでしょう。
But 逆で。私はまず韓国に行って真っ先にボーダーラインの景色を見たかったんです。それはなぜかって言ったらその民族的なアイデンティティでもなくて、ボーダーラインはどのように現実において存在しているのかを見てみたかった。
So, well, when she went to Korea, one of the first things she wanted to do was to see this border area, but that isn't so much because she's ethnically Korean. But she just wanted to see what a border actually looks like.
Okay.
Yeah. So and そのテレスコープで見たときに、私この景色知ってるかもしれないと思ったんです。
And when she looked at the border area through a telescope, she felt that she already knew it somehow.
なぜなら私もおばあちゃんもお父さんもみんなこの教会の中でずっと生きてるんだなって。
because she and her parents and her grandmother effectively have lived all of their lives in a kind of border zone.
でその境界線がとても政治的なシンボルであるように、私たちは日本ですごくその政治的な国際問題、特に韓国とか日本とか北朝鮮とかっていうものの問題の矢面に立たされる、すごくシンボリックなものとしてのアイデンティティを持っている。だけど私たち本当はそこがすごく自由になりたい。だけどその38度線の空間もある種自由、そこは独立した空間があった。
So obviously a national border is a very political symbol, but she felt that her whole family has been on the front line of sort of various political issues in Japan, including of course the issues related to Japan-Korea relations and I suppose Korea-Korea relations. And she and her family members want to be kind of free and independent in the same way that this border area is just free and wild.
Okay. Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, I suppose many of you haven't yet seen the exhibition, so I can actually stand up now, which is obviously on the floor below. And the Hiroshima Nagasaki work is in this room on the floor below, so it's all on the floor below, but don't miss that either. The work on the floor, which is below the people at the back of the room, is on the floor, so please be careful, don't walk on it, and we're going to remove your drinks and things when you go into that room. Apparently she's had problems in the past with people like spilling drinks and walking on the work, but that doesn't do it any good, so please try and avoid touching or damaging the work, because it is only made out of sheets of newspaper. They're not particularly robust. I'd also like to say thank you very much indeed to the Delfina Foundation. I think several people are here from the Delfina Foundation who've been supporting supporting Sumi's residency and collaborating with us on this exhibition, and also the Contemporary Art Foundation Japan. And of course I have to thank our two discussants today. So thank you very much to Jonathan and Sumi for a really fascinating discussion, which we can continue over a drink downstairs.
And also thanks to Jason J.